Hi, I'm Ahava Leaptag. Today I'm joined by my friend Kelly Savage. Kelly is the Director of Social Media and Engagement at the Ohio State University Wexner Medical Center and Board Chair of socialmedia.org Health. Today we're going to talk about social media. You've got questions, we've got answers. Let's get to it. Hi, Ahava. It feels like there is more content than ever online. Our social feeds are so busy. My question is, how can we create social content that stands out when patients are bombarded by information online? And I'm going to take it one step further with you and say, and misinformation.
Yes, yes. And I think COVID really sort of taught us about the depth of that, right? In the past, I had always kind of said, oh man, this is like the community management piece of being in healthcare is pretty easy, right? We get to, just sort of build community and chat with people. And, then COVID really showed us the depth of, sort of where some of this misinformation lies and how people are really turning to social media to find answers to that. And so I think now we're, sort of entering an even newer phase of being a little bit unsure of what that's going to look like and what types of misinformation are going to be out there. So, certainly being flexible and having folks that are willing to, especially for us, hop on video to really be able to debunk something really quickly. We have a lot of really great articles that can explain a lot of these topics, but when we're thinking about a platform, particularly like TikTok, where there are tons of wellness influencers and folks who are talking a lot about the healthcare space, how are we kind of stopping the scroll? And so one thing that we've really tried to do is to make sure that we're using video content in the way that we can to like get right into the topic. So we've done a lot of testing, like removing intro cards, if it's popping up with our logo and the name, people are just scrolling right on by. So instead we're popping right in with that doctor. He doesn't need to introduce themselves. We've got their title coming across the bottom. So they're starting off, hey, today we're talking about XYZ. And so that way you're able to really kind of catch people in that moment to be able to get into the weeds as much as you can and, hopefully under 60 seconds. And then for folks who are interested in learning more, we do have the ability to direct them to the link and, run ads to kind of help with that. But we're sort of hoping that that first touch point will really be able to get to the broad point of the misinformation and make sure that we're correcting it as easily as we can.
I notice that you have a very clear strategy for each channel. When I look at your Facebook, it's different than your Instagram, different than your TikTok. I think a lot of hospital and healthcare clients struggle with this. Sometimes they don't have robust social media teams that can really do that kind of work, but it's so critical because the same person can be using Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn and TikTok in the same day. And every single time they open up that application, they come to it with a different mindset.
Yeah.
And it's so important to change what you're creating, what you're writing, what you're putting on video. The whole thing needs to have a little bit of a different flavor. So can you talk to me a little bit about the strategy that you employ? Do you have different personas? Do you have different style and voice and tone guidelines? How do you make sure that your content creators are adhering to the content strategy for each channel?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first point you made is one I definitely want to drive home, which is we have a team of people. And there's a lot of support from our leadership to have grown the social team to where we're at today. And we talk to lots and lots of people who are, one man, one woman shows trying to do this. And that can be very difficult. So I do always like to kind of call that out because I think that's the most important piece is sort of having the resources to be able to build that type of strategy. Secondly, yes, we do have a little bit different voice on certain channels. So certainly on Instagram and TikTok, we're willing to take a little bit more risk when it comes to how edgy we want to be. During COVID, we had a lot of success with memes. I think it was just sort of right for that type of content because some of the misinformation was just like so wild that we were able to kind of be a little bit jokey about it while also still making sure that our captions were super informative. And so we're taking sort of that same approach with a lot of the video in terms of like listening to what people are talking about. So even when we think about Facebook, for example, let's say we're sharing an article about Alzheimer's and we know that our audience is a little bit older there. So maybe we're sharing this article and we're highlighting more specifically about what signs to look out for, what tests you can take to kind of make sure that you're catching it early, those types of things. But then when we're thinking about how we want to use that on a platform like TikTok, we're talking more about caregiving for someone with Alzheimer's or, preventive
Because
tips.
of the younger audience.
Exactly.
Okay.
And because so much of these platforms now, especially when we think about TikTok, are becoming search engines, we're able to use a lot of that keyword data to really identify how we want to shift that strategy, and have those different kind of, maybe we're talking about the same topic, but we're looking at it from a couple of different lenses.
I've heard that social media platforms want to keep users on the platform, and the algorithm favors posts that don't have external links. The metrics we used to care about don't seem to tell us much anymore. Tell me your thoughts on the death of click-through rate and the need for zero-click content.
Yeah, that is such a great question. We've just been having conversations around how we're updating the types of metrics that we're pulling now, because also the platforms are changing so quickly. And Meta in particular is deprecating a lot of stuff that we've used for a long time, and how we're measuring things like engagement.
They're really throttling everything.
Yeah, yeah, and at the same time, taking away our ability to target people appropriately with our ad dollars as well. And so, I think that there's definitely a big shift there. We're still seen some, success on certain platforms with links, but we really have, again, leaned into that video content to be able to kind of make up for that, in other areas. And again, trying to make sure that we're catching people to keep them there. And we see that. We see when we use video, our clicks are significantly lower than when we're posting just a straight article post with a link. But are those people watching the whole video? Where are they getting through? How long of the video are they watching?
And where's the call to action in the video as opposed
Exactly.
to an article? Yeah,
Yep.
it's complicated. I would like to follow up with a question, because this is where I'm spending most of my time thinking about. What is Google's overall thought process here? Why do these platforms are advertising platforms, and they're awarding zero-click content, but yet the advertisers are paying for them to send people through to their sites? So
Right.
what are they thinking?
Yeah.
They're cannibalizing their own businesses.
Exactly, exactly. And I think part of it is sort of just this feeling of needing to continue to change. Sometimes I think there's just, hey, let's shift this, let's shift this, let's see if this works. I mean, and how many times have we seen a social media change happen and
Then pull back later.
a
Yeah.
year later, we're back in
Absolutely.
the same position that we were before. And so that's why I think it's important not to make rash decisions too, as we're, kind of shifting what that strategy looks like, because it's a lot of work to say, all right, now we're just going to focus on video. Okay, that means I better learn how to edit video. My whole team better know how to edit video. And what if, now first they want video that's 30 seconds. Now they're saying, oh, it can be 3 minutes. Now they're saying it's just about how long.
And also there's no tracking. There's no tracking on
Exactly.
video. We still haven't figured out that loop. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, for me, there's a part of me that thinks like Google's just like the Wizard of Oz. Like somebody would pull back the curtain and they'd like find like a monkey sitting there typing.
Yeah.
All these engineers that work there actually just like, I don't know what they do.
Yeah.
But I'm not concerned about it. I think there's so much opportunity, especially with the LLMs and AI, for people to really think the way that they're writing their content, creating their content, all of it. But I just don't really understand what they're thinking here. And I've heard the argument of like, well, they want you to spend more money so that the ads show up so that people will click through. But on Google, they're showing AI overviews first. So you don't even have those sponsored ads on the top. I just don't get it. It's really confusing to me. And I guess it's an exciting time to be alive. I don't know.
Yeah. If you like the chaos, it's great.
I would love to ask you about the fact that you do such a great job with such great social content. What's a piece of advice that you have for a marketing team that is struggling to produce social media consistently? So you have a team of 6, but let's say somebody came to you and the way you started out, you had 1.5 people.
Yeah.
What would you say to somebody who says, I have 1.5 people and I've been tasked to do all these things? Where do I start? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, so I think the first is not be afraid to say no and push back. And that's something I've learned a lot as I've just continued on in my career. And it's something that I tell my team all the time.
16 years gives you the ability to say, we're not going to do that.
Correct. And any time that you can kind of tell that story with data and say, but here's what we could do instead, or here's kind of what an alternative is. So that
I love that. That's yes and. Yes,
exactly.
And.
Because I think, and particularly in healthcare, I think people are sometimes a little bit afraid of social media. And so what I don't want to do is sort of like snuff out someone's excitement about it, but I do want to be realistic about what we can actually accomplish. So that's definitely my first thing. The second thing that has been particularly helpful for me is identifying other people within the department that sort of have the eye for that type of thing and are willing to kind of help tell the story if they are somewhere that you are not. So a great example of this is we might do a super highly produced patient story that our video team works on. They're fantastic. The stories are great. Our video team is amazing. They'll happily cut me a 60-second or less vertical.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
And they do fine, right? But we had just an amazing patient story that we got this awesome video from. And I was like, oh man, this is going to be great. It did all right. The same story, we had this patient getting a clap out at the medical center with all of the nurses and doctors, you know, and one of our media relations team members captured it on her phone, texted it to me, and was like, hey, don't know if you can use this for anything, but thought it might be good. Again, exact same patient we had already posted a much more like informative, compelling story about. And it blew up. The clap out blew up. I mean, over 1 million views on YouTube Shorts, like with just organic. So
Congratulations.
yeah, it was great. And I think it was a really good example of we can't be everywhere at once. Oftentimes, even if we could have been somewhere, we maybe are not always in the picture, you know, especially if it's involving a patient and we're trying not to have, you know, 30 marketers in the room with a patient. So how can we kind of arm our marketing managers, our media relations people, our photographers to just whip out their phone and get me something that then I can take and my team can take and kind of make it pretty
Don't be afraid to be our eyes and ears. Yeah, I love that.
exactly.
I think that's such great advice for a 1.5 person team. Kelly, thank you so much for joining me, friends. And thanks to our viewers for joining in. I hope you got the answer that you needed today. If you have a burning question, put it in the comments or email it to ahava.leaptag@ahamediagroup.com. See you next time.